Hi, welcome to Shun Hing Alumni Chat. Today's session will be hosted by Nicolo.
Good evening and welcome to the Shun Hing College Alumni Chat. I am Nicolo Ludovice and I will be your host for this evening's chat. Tonight, we are very privileged to have with us a Shun Hing alumni who has soared greater heights. He graduated from HKU in 2019 with an MPhil degree in history. He was also a former junior tutor at the college 2 years ago. He is now a PhD student of history, anthropology, science, technology, and society at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Please join me in welcoming live from Belgium, Mr. Rustam Khan. Hi, Rustam. How are you?
Hi, Nicolo. Hi, Sonakshi. Hi, everybody that is tuning in. I'm very happy to be back and to see old and hopefully new faces. So I'm doing pretty good today.
It's fantastic to see you once more. We definitely miss you here in Hong Kong. How is the weather in Belgium?
It's kind of gray and gloomy, so I'm trying to keep optimistic, and I definitely also want to go back to Hong Kong right now. But given the circumstances, a bit harder. But I'm keeping the spirits high, So yeah.
But from as we understand, you are having your classes all the way in Belgium, right?
Yeah, so COVID happened, and you need to be a bit flexible. So I'm like taking most of my classes online, which is of course not ideal, I'd say, but I'm very grateful still to be able to have started my studies from abroad, because I feel like in these times things could have been worse, and I'm just happy that I was able to start, and just fingers crossed that I can go there as soon as possible, and once I'm there, I'll just like make most of my time there, I guess.
Fantastic. So when are we going to see you back in Hong Kong? We've missed you here at the Department of History.
Yeah, I'll definitely try to come back, as soon as possible again, but maybe in 2021, I'd be happy to see everybody again.
For those who are tuning in, no, Rustam was a former former MPhil student in the Department of History at HKU, and we actually shared a common space for at least a year, I think. And we had great memories during his stay here in Hong Kong. Rustam, who was your supervisor back then?
So my supervisor was Dr. Oscar Sanchez Siboni. He studies Soviet history and like global capitalism. I think it's close to his fifth or sixth year at HKU. So yeah, great memories, as you say, great memories.
What was the topic that you were working on?
So initially, I was planning on working something related to like Cold War and transnational history, but ideas change. And I basically started studying urbanization, built environments in Northeast Asia, and I focused on one very particular city called Vladivostok, which is located in the Russian Far Eastern province called Primorsky Krai. And it was just an interesting study of looking at how cities grow in tandem and mutually dependent on their wider environment, such as coal mining, rivers, waste management, and so on. So that's kind of like looking at cities as a metabolism rather as like a strictly spatially planned object.
It's fantastic that I can still remember that you participated in the 3MT competition, and I think you were among those who were part of the top 10, right, of the 3MT. Do you still remember that?
Yeah, of course. That was like, I guess, the highlight of my public scholarship. And it was definitely a very nice experience. I'd encourage anybody to kind of engage, whatever level you are at in academia, to kind of engage in such, whether it's competitions or like challenges, whatever you want to call it. But I think these are like good moments where you can really just come out and like actually try to translate and explain to people that actually have no clue what you're working on. So yeah, that was a very good experience, I'd say, and I'd be happy to to do it again. By the way, for those that are not aware of like what a 3MT is, 3-minute thesis competition is a worldwide competition in which graduate students are encouraged to talk about their subjects in less than 3 minutes. And so therefore they have to like, with only one slide, they try to, engage with the public and explain to them, what is it that they're working on, why is it important, and what kind of like the long-term consequences are. And it's like a worldwide competition held in different universities all over the world.
And we are actually quite proud because the Department of History has been consistent in terms of sending their 3MT candidates, and they usually place on the top 10 with Rustam here as part of them, right, Rustam?
Yeah, that was more of like a tradition at the history department. And I was, again, kind of glad because it was like more of a collective undertaking, where like professors and other students engaged and gave you actually comments and criticized you harshly if you didn't really appear to be very engaging, or if you didn't really speak very clearly. So that was like also the more interesting part, to kind of like, engage with this on a team level, not really on an individual level.
So what happened to you after you graduate? I remember that you took a break from academics and went on an internship. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience outside?
Definitely, it's as you say. So while I was doing my MPhil at HKU, I kind of really knew that the PhD was a path that I wanted to move on, But at the same time, also at certain moments while I was studying, I did feel kind of uncomfortable about certain aspects of graduate life and academia, that in the long term, and say for example isolation, job uncertainties and so on. So I kind of decided consciously to take some time off and to explore other things. So I did, among others, I did an internship at the United Nations ESCAP, which is the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, which is basically a department that focuses a lot on like research and providing information to various governments about how to tackle certain issues. I stayed in Kazakhstan. That was in Almaty in the south of Kazakhstan. Yes. I stayed there for like a couple of months, 3 to 4 months. But it was a very interesting experience, and most of the time I sat there as an anthropologist, I would say, because it was very interesting to kind of engage with all these different professionals that have been in the game for over like 20, 30 years, and like talking with them was really kind of an eye-opener. After that, I came back to Belgium, where I started working in education. I became a high school teacher for a couple of months. It was also a very interesting way to, again, kind of take a different perspective on education and kind of feel what it means to actually, and actually teach things to children, to young adults. I was teaching English, by the way. And at the same time, I also started exploring different places of Eastern Europe, since it's kind of my geographic focus, like in terms of research, but also in terms of interest. So I started, going around places such as Hungary, the Baltic states, Poland, and so on, to kind of actually see, you read all the time about these places in the books, but how does it feel like to be there? So that was also an important thing, actually, to kind of actually like connect the dots, to actually get like some visual map of the places you read about. So. And after that, I went to Taiwan because, I also went to Central Asia, places like Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, where I, tried to, and that was really an interesting way because I was able to talk about different topics that, like what is historical memory, built environments. This is a picture from Poland. It's a place called Nowa Huta. It's like a new socialist town that was built starting in the 40s and 50s near Krakow. So went to Central Asia, and also to kind of like finish up, I went to Taiwan, did some language study because I remain strong interest in Asia. I studied abroad in China and in Hong Kong then also. So I did some language study, and then Corona happened, and now I'm here, studying. So that's kind of like a compression of what I did.
That happened in just a span of how many years? Like 1 year?
Yeah, like 1 to 2 years. Yeah, 1 to 2 years.
1 to 2 years. And you've had so much experience in that short span of time. Well, what made you decide to go on such an internship? It's quite unorthodox for a history graduate to go into ESCAP, for instance. What made you decide to go on an internship like that?
So I mean, obviously, it's like you're young and free, I guess. You want to explore a bit the world. Like going for like a 9 to 5 right away didn't seem to be like a thing I wanted to do. So that's one thing. The other thing is, given my interest in socialist history and life and post-socialist environments, I thought like being in in a place like Kazakhstan would be super interesting. And thirdly, I think partly because I wanted to know what it feels like to do actually research outside an academic context, so like more in like international organization. That felt also like a very big that was a very big motivation to actually apply for different organizations like the UN. And I mean, granted, I only stayed there as an intern for like maximum 4 months, but I think it was definitely very valuable in terms of like actually thinking about seeing how like the ideas you have in mind actually are being discussed at in like an entirely different context, and you see, and that kind of like that kind of difference does really help you to kind of get like a broader picture.
Mm. And for our viewers now, if you have questions for Rustam, you can start typing them on our comments on comment section, and then we will and on our social media we will address them as we go along. So I think this is something that is the burning question on everyone's mind right now. No, you're pursuing PhD studies, you're pursuing graduate studies, and I'm sure that for a lot of our students, they're thinking about that. Tell us what made you decide on embarking on a PhD, because in terms of career opportunities, in terms of you are going to study for another 4 or 5 years in the United States, and what made you decide to study again?
Yeah, I really like that question, and it's a question that doesn't really that will not be resolved, by having like one deep philosophical moment in your life. I think it's like an ongoing question, as you know yourself, Nicolo, very much. It's like at different moments in throughout your career, whether it's like as a graduate student, but also later, as I've been told, you like ask yourself, what's kind of the point of me doing this, and so on. So I think again, having like tasted, at least I would say, from like different careers that I could do, I felt that like the PhD was still something that appealed to me, because you are able to engage with certain topics a bit deeper. You can write about it. You can and also write about subjects I think that you care about. And I rather prefer that than doing a job rather mindlessly. Of course, like there are like many things that you have to keep in mind once you do the PhD. As you said yourself, it's like a very long trajectory, 5 to 6 to 7 years in the States. Europe is a bit different, but the real stress comes later. That's, as I've been told, the stress of finding a job and a very precarious job market is a thing that you have to keep in mind. It's a relatively low pay, so if you come with like a background of being a banker on Wall Street and you become a graduate student, you might be slightly disappointed with the salary you get. And again, like kind of like the classic issues, isolating work might appear. So these are things just to keep in mind. But I think why I chose to do the PhD is, again, like it's a new experience, especially if I would go to the States. It's a new place, new people that I would meet. And I also kind of, the reason why I chose the US, I'd say, is also because I was interested in like the particular system where they allow you to actually dig a bit deeper, to kind of explore different subjects or different angles of the subject you want to write about. And like in Europe or in Hong Kong, you have to like jump in right away, I'd say. And I also kind of knew the people. Well, I didn't know them personally, but I kind of knew the research of people, certain people, and I knew kind of that I wanted to learn from them, study with them, and kind of learn from them. Yeah, be a student. So that's kind of like one reason why I chose to do the PhD.
And your experience from your internship is actually carried over all the way to your PhD, right? You can see that the desire to interact and connect with other students. So how long did it take you to prepare for your application for your PhD?
It took quite some time, but why don't we maybe just quickly step back and like I'll explain what my program is actually about, because we still have no. I don't think we discussed that, but basically I'm currently at Hasts, which is, as Nicolo said, History, Anthropology, Science, Technology, and Society. A very long, but usually say the acronym Hasts. It's a program in which we study how things like science and technology involve in history, and instead of like looking at them as like these value-free, neutral objects, you really look at them as very political, social, cultural subjects that change and tandem and mutually dependent on a variety of other subjects and factors in society. So this is kind of like what STS in general does, as you know yourself, Nicolo,
Yes.
very well. And so Hasts as a program at MIT is under the School of Humanities, which is a relatively small school, but still we have plenty of connections to all other schools. And the really nice thing about Hasts is that it's actually anti-disciplinary almost. As
Of
in,
course,
like,
yes.
people don't
Mm.
really want to categorize themselves as either a historian or an anthropologist. And so that's kind of also the nice thing about Hasts.
Yes, and when we talk about science and technology, it's not just science and technology per se. It's not just innovation, but also how science, technology, and plays in the society and about the society. And so a lot of these factors are merging and combining in the forces of science, technology, and medicine are trying to come up with, especially now, no, with COVID, that is currently ongoing, and so what universities did you apply for in during your application process?
Yeah, so I did apply to like slightly. I applied to I think 8 universities, and I got 5 fully funded offers, and one
Mhm.
semi-funded offer for like a master's program. And the universities I did get into were Duke University in North Carolina, NYU in
Yeah.
New York, Michigan University in Michigan, MIT, and UPenn, University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and I also got into the master's program at University of Chicago in Chicago. So I'm very grateful, of course, that I got into so many programs that I was in a
Mm.
privileged position to like choose, and very grateful for that. And of course, that's like, as you said, like it's a work in progress. So I mean, obviously, I didn't like achieve this all on my own, as I would say. I was grateful that for all the feedback I was receiving along the way. So I definitely have to acknowledge that. So because, as you know, there has been a spat of media attention in the States about all these, admission scandals.
Of
Um,
course.
so it's always good to just keep kind of the context in mind.
And also not only that, but as far as the humanities is concerned, history is not among the priority as far as funding, as far as scholarship is concerned. And when one tries to do humanities PhD in the United States, even funding opportunities are actually quite scarce. But you are able to manage somehow to get not just one, but these 6 PhD scholarships being offered to you now. So my question is, you know why among all of these scholarships, why particularly MIT? What made you decide that I will zoom in and focus on accepting on MIT?
Yeah, so that was, of course, again, like a difficult question, because all these programs, universities were very interesting. They had people that I definitely wanted to work with, but you have to make a choice. So I think 3 things that you always have to keep in mind, I guess, would be: one is where do you want to live actually? Because that is kind of important, especially if you're gonna like commit 5 or 6 years of your life to a particular place. You know, you don't want to like end up in a place that you might not really like. So that's one consideration that you always have to keep in mind. The second one is research fits. And as I mentioned, like the people, which people do you want to work with? And different programs had like different focuses. Like one university, like one department, I felt that if I would like go into that direction, I'd be more trained as a strictly Russian historian. In another department, I would be a bit like well theoretically trained, and in terms of like theories and so on about how you think of history. And my key was I kind of knew that I would be definitely thrown into like a new field because anthropology and STS I haven't really, that's definitely a new field for me. I only like explored them personally. And so that's like, what kind of department, what is the vibe at the department, what kind of work is produced at those departments, what kind of people are working at those departments, and it's important, of course, to have like an idea of like who you would like to work with, although that's not that important in the beginning in the States, but you also want to make sure that you have multiple faculty that you can see yourself working with. And they don't have to necessarily be people that are directly dealing with the geographical or like chronological time frame you're working. So it's good, like it's perfectly fine if like somebody else has a different interest that you can see contributing, that is able to contribute to your research. And finally, money matters. You don't want to do a PhD unfunded or like semi-funded, especially in the humanities. It's not that it will give you again a job to Goldman Sachs or something like that. So you do have to kind of keep in mind that you want to live comfortably. You want to make sure that you're able to pay the bills and even able to save a bit of money. Of course, that's a very personal question. It depends on like your family situation. It depends on your lifestyle. It depends on the place you want to live in. Like living in New York and living in North Carolina, or like New York City and North Carolina are like very different views. So
when you talk about it's a fully funded scholarship, does it include living allowance and dormitory?
Yes, exactly. So when I say fully funded offers, I mean that the department or the scholarship that you get covers the tuition fees, because in the States often you have to pay your tuition fees and also your living costs. So that's kind of like a fully funded, and different universities have like different. Oh, and by the way, in the States, very important, health insurance. Always get health insurance. You don't want to pay it on yourself. And then different universities have like different extra budgets for like in terms of like travel allowance, research allowance, things like that.
So a lot of factors are coming into picture, not just the prestige of a particular department, but also the practical matters, where you want to live, culture, money, everything that you just mentioned. And what other preparations did you do? I mean, did you also include studying for the GRE, and did you have to take the English language test, for instance?
Yeah, thank you. These are like very concrete but important questions, I think. Maybe just again to step back, I did start early. So that's like one very important advice, please don't start like 1 month before the deadlines. I, more or less, with the background that I already had, even then I already kind of started at least like almost 9 months ahead. I started already thinking about
9 months.
What kind of ideas, what do I want to talk about, which universities do I want to apply to, who is at those universities. So this is like, trying to establish a general framework, and that really helps, thinking about, your life experience, work experience, graduate experience, how that all like helps to think about who you are and the story that you want to present to the admission committees. In terms of the tests, yes, in the States you do have to do the GRE, which I feel it was an awful test. It's not hard, but it's not hard, but it can like emotionally crush you if you're not well and dealing with deadlines and like making tests under pressure, under time pressure. So what I suggest that if you do have to do the GRE and the TOEFL, please do them make them ahead of time. You don't want to make it like 1 week before deadline again. You want to like get rid of the small important details in the beginning, and then focus a bit more on your research, your personal statement, your research statement. And another thing I was also very helpful, create an Excel sheet with like a concrete overview of like which university you want to apply to, what kind of people are working there, what kind of funding is available, have you submitted, what are the requirements in terms of GRE, TOEFL. Some departments require you to write a diversity statement. Some departments require you to write a research statement and then a personal statement. So like two different things. Like one is more personal, biographical. The other one is a bit more like about the work you want to do. So these are like all very diverging matters for every department, and it's good to kind of keep that in mind, to avoid any kind of mistakes.
Yes, and I agree, no, especially that the selection of your university should be strategic in the sense you cannot just keep on applying to all universities, for example, because because these universities also have admission fees or application fees, which are quite expensive.
Yes.
And how did you manage to do all of these in the span of 9 months with all of your work as an intern and then doing MPhil work and everything? It really takes a lot of time and effort.
Definitely. So again, like that's the importance of that Excel sheet and like the general framework to kind of know what's happening. I do know that. I mean, I kind of got the advice, don't like 5 to 8 schools. That's kind of like and that was already a bit on the side of like, that's like the higher side, I'd say. But I also feel, I kind of selected really the schools that I knew the people would be kind of interesting. The department overall orientation would be very, just would appeal to me. And in terms of, you do have to pay a lot of fees. You have to pay for the GRE fees. You have to pay for the TOEFL test. You have to pay for all the applications, and like on average that might cost about $100. So that can really add up very quickly. Again, I kind of also knew that I wanted to apply, so I started saving. I started saving in advance, to make sure that I wouldn't, and that's that's a personal matter. I don't know like how it is for other students.
Yes.
Yeah, one thing that I maybe want to highlight, as people now see on the screen, and that's like there are like a couple of interesting forums that I shared, and so actually we'll drop the links in the chat in the comments section. One of them is the Grad Cafe. It's kind of like a cafe like with where more than half is generally a lurker, like they just kind of like sit there and follow discussions.
Wow.
But it's a very interesting forum. It's like everything related to like graduate school life applications. You have very different sections related to like particular disciplines, to particular places, to the actual, like researching, finding a job and so on. So I kind of did get quite some information and general kind of ideas of how to compile my statement of purpose.
That fascinating. And for our viewers right now, I encourage you to ask questions, type in your questions on our social media accounts, on Facebook and on YouTube. We will be gladly taking in your questions very soon. So Rustam, tell us, would it help if you contact your mentor or your supervisor in advance?
Yes, definitely, and I highly advise that, and that's what I've been told as well. So, I mean, many of the things that I'm saying is actually what other people told me. So, despite me being a first-year PhD student, these are things, again, this is through conversation, and that's not another thing that I want to highlight. Talk to people. Talk to people, both friends and family. Talk to your previous supervisors at school, at work, and you'll be surprised to what kind of angles and insights you might get, because you might think that you kind of know who you are, but you can get very different ideas and insights about who you are, like what you want to work in, or like whether your proposal is actually viable or not in the long term. Regarding contacting potential advisors, definitely, that's what I did. Not everybody replies. And that's kind of understandable. I mean, some people are very busy, very famous, and they travel. But other people are extremely warm and extremely open, and they're willing to kind of like talk to you and kind of like give an overall kind of feedback on your proposal. Don't expect that they might like actually read your statements or whatever. Because that
Yes.
might actually not be very honest, not honest, but not very fair to like all applicants, obviously. But it's very, very advisable that you contact them and kind of like tell them who you are, that you're interested in studying and submitting an application. And they most likely, more than often, they will really just give you some tips, some advice that might be useful.
So we have a question here, which is, can you share some advice on writing the personal and the research statements? I mean, this is particularly important. When I can still remember when I applied here to HKU. It's one of the essays that I really had to think through, not just for one day, but for several weeks. And what are some of the tips or advice that you can give for students who are trying to put in their personal and research statements?
Yes, I think the research statement or the SOP, statement of purpose, personal statement, so depending on what it is, that's, I think, one of the key ingredients to a good application, primarily because many other parts of your application will be very standardized. The test scores, your GPA, the letters of recommendation, they are like variable, but the SOP is really kind of the moment where you can rise and shine, where you can talk about who you are, talk about your research. So in terms of concrete advice, I definitely say avoid cliches to start with. Though I mean, like, I'm obsessed, or like I have a passion for history or any other discipline. I mean, obviously many other people will have, so you don't want to kind of like emphasize that. I'd also say, like, don't repeat your CV, because some people might actually just like reiterate everything they've done, but I don't think that's kind of the purpose of the SOP. It's like a personal statement. It has to give you a different angle on what you are writing about, where you're coming from. So really avoid just summarizing everything you've done. You have the CV, and that's like a different place, and people can always go back to your CV and look concretely in detail what you've done, where you have been. So then the personal statement is also a very limited, right? It's like often 2 or 3 pages. And so I think the most important thing is to kind of like tell a story, tell a story about who you are, your biographical, your social, your academic, your professional experiences, how like different experiences have made the person you are right now and have actually led to ask you the questions you want to ask. And that's kind of important to kind of like show, like, for example, for me, I was in Kazakhstan, and I talked about being in Kazakhstan, a post-socialist environment that is haunted by different problems in terms of infrastructure and built environments. I kind of try to explain that how seeing that, how working on very concrete contemporary issues kind of led me to ask, how built environments that once arose in a very different ideological, socioeconomic context have translated, have evolved in a new context, and that kind of helped me to kind of understand, to kind of raise the questions, that I want to talk about in the long term. Another very big thing is, please proofread, reread, and delete, things. I rewrote my statement multiple times, and it's good to be very harsh, and it's again good to circulate your statement. It's better that people harshly criticize your statement as it is right now, rather than you submitting it in a naive kind of hope that you'll be admitted. It's better that people really kind of criticize it, and and just kind of that you are able to like change it along the way. So I think in terms of like statement, again, make a story. I think make a story. It's also good to make a detailed, like show that it doesn't have to be that detailed, but if you can show that you are able to envision how your proposal might actually be in detail, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will be like that, but if you can show that you are able to visualize in concrete terms what you actually would like to work on, that's actually good because the admission committee will see that you are able to think further, that it's not only like I'm interested in socialist history and that's it, that you're able to kind of like to clear a path for yourself.
It's I think your points on how to write a good personal statement really just hits the mark, because number one, you've explained about having a great storyline. Okay, it doesn't have to be world shattering storyline, but something that is very personal to you. And second, you've also emphasized about how you will make your story stand out from all the other applicants, from all the other statement of purposes that they will be reading. And one has to keep in mind that these universities will be receiving thousands of applications, and your application needs to stand out and needs to speak for itself. And third, the thing that sometimes, because of the lack of time or whatnot, no, they forget to edit and to proofread their own work. And so ask for help, always seek for help from other sources, from other people, in doing so. We have a question from Theory Swe. Thanks so much for sharing. Very insightful. I have a question in regards to the Hasts program. Is it designed to be in academia or tuned towards non-academic related works such as policy work, etc.?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Most people at Hasts, most graduates, they have gone on to the academic track. Because it still kind of teaches you how to write, a dissertation, how to talk to scholarly audiences on very, again, concrete questions, theoretical debates, and so on. Nevertheless, I must really say that Hasts is very open. The faculty realize that the academic job market isn't necessarily what it was in the past, and so they often encourage you to kind of take internships, to explore other fields, to engage in different labs at MIT, to be part of another community. And I think that's very heartening and supporting, because you feel that people are kind of like honest with you, yeah, they're honest with you, and I think that's what I kind of value, at least. In general, I also always, that's a good question, because I always feel that it's important to kind of track what other people from the program that you have applied to or planning on applying to, what have other people done with their degrees. Have most gone into an academic career? Have others like pursued, like as Thierry Shreya says, non-academic work, policy work, and so on? It's important because you kind of see what kind of orientation certain programs have. Some programs might be very still like academic oriented and say, we train here historians or these kind of disciplines. Others might be very open and like even encourage you and help you, and they will have a special person designated to kind of help you finding non-academic jobs or things like that. So that's also important to keep in mind. How do people add to the department? And I often also asked during the admissions interviews and so on how people, what people thought of like the job market, or what do they do to help graduate students secure post PhD employment.
So it's particularly important to keep in mind that a PhD is not for it doesn't guarantee it's not supposed to be an end all be all thing, right? And I think Rustam, you will agree with me when we say that it depends on how you really make the most out of your PhD program. So whether or not you choose to work in the academe or when you choose to work in the industry, a PhD is going to make you a leader in that particular field, in that particular discipline that you're currently working on.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel that's why it's important to keep your mind open, and during the applications, but also during your PhD, keep your mind open. Be curious, have your imagination sharp. Because I think doing that will actually make you not look like a routine scholar. Like what is it about your story or the research you want to write about that is unique or unique, and by that I mean like atypical. And if you even like just look at any kind of writing course, creative writing course, they will always try to tell the stories that are able to hook you on are like often stories that capture the attention of the reader. And I think kind of having this metaphor in general is also helpful to think about the questions that you just asked, Nicolo.
Of course. Oh, we have a question here from Anne. She asks, how did you narrow down your research proposal topic? How do you find the balance between building upon existing literature versus a topic that is novel and new? Oh, this is actually a good one, I think,
Yeah,
especially on the PhD level, right?
yeah, definitely. I think it depends again on like which program. In the States, they will not really require you to really dig deep. They will kind of like require you to kind of know the field you want to engage with. In Europe, though, or like in Hong Kong, they will really kind of expect that you really kind of know what topic and what literature you want to engage with. In terms of how do you find that balance, I'd say just kind of I didn't engage with like the details because I felt that they didn't really add that much to what I wanted to say. You can be also very rather quite broad. You can make safe generalizations. You don't need to. It doesn't have to be a black and white picture, but you can like try to make general contextualizations or generalizations about how the existing literature thinks about the questions, or about the topics. I also avoid really, don't dig right away into the details of or particular literature, because you often have to realize that the admissions committee is often composed of like different people with different backgrounds. So, for example, at Hasts, I knew that there would be an anthropologist, historians, there would be people with urban planning. I have a professor with like a chemistry background. So like all these different backgrounds, you kind of need to realize that you need to talk in a way that is understandable enough for everybody. So please
Yes.
don't make these very complex sentences or complex descriptions.
Or even jargon, no?
Yes, exactly. I also think about in terms of like another concrete tactic is like the reverse pyramid. Reverse pyramid, like you start like a bit general and then like pick up like one or two like particular strains in the literature that you want to address. Again, because the statement is so short, the limit is quite high. Really, don't select everything you want to work on. Select like one or two things you really want to work on and you want to talk to, and then like focus on that. And obviously, the PhD is a one learning path, and your ideas will change, and you might really make 180 degrees turns, in terms of like how you think about certain topics, and you will abandon topics and so on. So I think just keeping that in mind will kind of like relax a bit. It's okay if you don't want to talk about everything. Just one or two things, and I'd say that's fine.
And I'm sure you'll agree with me when I say that doing a PhD program or you're doing a PhD research, it's actually joining into a larger conversation. So you cannot discuss everything and tackle everything. And so you just try to choose what part of the conversation do you want to engage in. And so that I think would also help. And as Rustam mentioned, it will also allow you to narrow down the research topic of your choice. And so we as a way of wrapping things up, you know, we've always emphasized that this chat is not just it's not just about PhD chat or scholarships chat, but this is also an alumni Shun Hing alumni chat. And I'd like to know, what is your fondest memory of Shun Hing when you were here?
Well, of course, meeting you, Nicolo, and Sonakshi, that was the greatest thing. But in general, I really say that meeting all the people and that was very pleasant. Becoming a tutor was also extremely valuable. Why? Because again, it comes back to this question of like, you as a person, you have a complex identity, right? You have multiple, in different contexts, you are somebody, and it's good to be an academic, but I'm besides, pursuing being a graduate student right now, I also like to do other things. And so I was happy to be very active in certain circles. And for example, at Shun Hing College, I was an honorary tutor where I organized different talks.
Like this one.
Like this one, right? This was like the Hong Kong Shenzhen connection, in which we talked about how, like politics, social connections between both cities, infrastructure between both cities, led to a shared history. I think that's very important. Like, and you might really just think that these are very minor things that are not important, but I actually think that these are actually one of the funniest moments you'll experience. And
like this one.
Like,
you still remember this one?
Of course, I know.
What is this?
These are like the monthly high table dinners that we had, and these were also very interesting because we always had like amazing speakers coming, and people like that have decades of experience in particular fields, not necessarily academic, and sharing how they think. And actually, I still like learned a couple of things that I remembered. Such as like don't make too fast a judgment of yourself. For example,
Yes.
you are changing, your identity is changing under different circumstances. So I definitely I'd say like meeting people with different backgrounds, working together, the teamwork, and yeah, being in a community. And I think that's important, especially because again, graduate student life can be very isolating sometimes, and it's good to kind of break out of that circle, break out of that like isolation, and meet new people.
Yes. And how did how did living in Shun Hing allow you to become the PhD student that you are today?
I think really many of the topics that I'm interested in, like pursuing academically, scholarly, are like topics that I learned through by my activities in Shun Hing College. So, for example, I just mentioned the different the lectures that we were organizing. So we organized different lectures on urbanization and how China is massively transforming both the physical landscape but also the social landscape. And so these are like actually strains of thought that I actually kept developing. So this is like one example. The other one is like many of the people that I met, including you, are interested in environmental history, and so like talking with very different backgrounds, right? Talking about general themes actually helps you, because these are like often the moments, good insights come actually often through like these conversations that we're having right now, right? And they often come like unexpectedly at moments that are really just good to remember. So I think these different things, also just being part of like the editorial team helps you writing. Meeting Professor Yin Chan and like knowing about what she's writing about, is really amazing. And she also helped me further with my applications. That's really all good. I think like just being part in this community and really try to build that community for yourself, whether that's academics, whether these are like good friends, whether these are like just other people from like just random people that you meet. That's always good.
And I really like how you have put it, that that a PhD application or any endeavor for that matter, it's built because of community, because of the community that you have shared, the people that you have met, and you have been building that over time, and it has led also to your to your success as a PhD student. And
Yeah.
so, Rustam, we thank you so much for your valuable input, for your time, and for your generosity in sharing to us how it is to be, how to apply, how to get all of these scholarships. Any final word or last word that you want to share to our audience?
Yeah, a couple of ones. Just maybe very practical. There are like two more
Especially to
links.
your current residents, huh? To our current residents.
Yeah. As like I share two more links, or like so actually share two more links. Academia Stack Exchange is another forum that you might like look at, and the professor is in that com is like is a very interesting person. She was a professor. She used to be a professor, but she gives a lot of advice on applications, on graduate student life, much more in depth, with much more experience, years of experience. So definitely look at that if you're interested further in like applying. And in general, some general advice that I always get, kind of from Oscar Sanchez-Siboni, kind of seek the conversations you actually want to engage with. That's more like academic. You don't kind of don't look for the conversations that you feel are a bit like stemming you or like choking you almost. So therefore keep your imagination open. I'd say read a lot. I keep reading all of fiction, and I often feel that's like mind-blowing in ways that nonfiction isn't able to achieve. And in general, try to keep your mind open and keep learning. I know these are like very general advice that you might hear in a TED talk, but I think nevertheless quite important.
And so, thank you, Rostam, very much for your time and generosity. Your advice on keep on reading, keep on being in a conversation, having to stand out. I think it has all contributed to your success as a PhD student. And so, we would also like to thank our producer, Ms. Sona Srivastava and Master Ying Chan, who made this production possible. We hope that this chat would inspire aspiring students to venture out and be the best versions of themselves. I am your host, Nicolo Ludovice, wishing you a very pleasant evening, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. See you.